Uh, Gosh, I'm quite surprised how Australians have reacted to my film, The Red Pill, because in the rest of the world, I haven't seen this kind of rage and anger about my film that I've seen in Australia. And I've really started to question what about Australia is different than the US or the UK and even Canada. We've had some protests in Canada, but not on the same level as in Australia. I have been thinking about what's unique about Australia, and I'm beginning to wonder if possibly it's the fear-mongering by the press around men's issues and how it relates to feminist views. And there's been a lot of misinformation spread by Australian press about me and my film. And I've tried to dispel those myths in my interviews, and they will edit it out completely. So it's been quite frustrating, but at least there are some Australians that have seen the film and know it's not anti-women and do believe it's an important discussion to be had. That does seem to be the common theme in Australia, is that people who are against the film haven't seen the film. And possibly the reason is because it has been pulled from so many venues and theaters in Australia because of these protesters who haven't seen the film. So it just seems like a cycle that keeps going, where they're against the film, they pull it from theaters so other people can't see it, and then all these people who can't see the film are still against it because they just have misinformation about the film. Well, I am planning after my trip here in Australia to go back home and start shuffling through all of my raw footage that hit the cutting room floor. I have over 100 hours of footage, and only 2 hours made it into the film, The Red Pill. So I think it's a disservice to just leave that footage on a hard drive collecting dust. I think there are people online who would be curious to watch the raw footage unedited and see what my interview subjects said, see how I responded, and I'm sure it would put to rest a lot of the lies in Australia about the film, where they were asking me if I questioned men's rights activists about certain topics, and I absolutely did, but there's only so much you can fit into a 2-hour documentary. And so I plan to release it for free online, and with the goal of it just inspiring more dialogue. Oh, my red pill moments throughout making The Red Pill were spread out across 3.5 years. And there wasn't one moment or one day that it was just the light bulb moment where my whole world changed. It was a very slow process for me. But probably one of the biggest life-changing realizations that I did have was seeing my own hypocrisy with my feminist views on men's issues. And I began to see the similar hypocrisy by my feminist friends and family and within the media. And I just really started to see the bias against men. And, I was a feminist of about 10 years prior to making The Red Pill. I focused on making films about women's issues. And when I was calling myself a feminist, I never thought of myself as man-hating or anti-male. But I began to start to see how my language and my dismissiveness towards men's issues was anti-male. So that was a really big light bulb moment for me. I don't call myself a men's rights activist for many reasons, and some of the reasons is because I'm a documentarian that made a film about men's issues. I'm not an activist for any cause. The Red Pill movie isn't trying to promote people to join any kind of movement. Really, all that my film advocates for is critical thinking for yourself as a viewer in the theater. And, I displayed the journey I went on, where I started as a feminist and now no longer call myself a feminist. In no way am I telling viewers to drop their label of feminist or become an MRA. I believe, people have free will and can do whatever they want to do, and I think the variety of voices about these issues are important. So Karen Strawn, who is very proudly anti-feminist and, approaches these issues with humor and sass, I think is very important to the discussion, as well as Christina Hoff Sommers, who remains a feminist, self-identifying feminist, and she addresses men's issues, and she has this YouTube channel, Factual Feminist. And, I think her voice and communication style is important in the big picture. So just for me personally, I have chosen not to pick a label for myself. I don't know if in the future I will I've thought egalitarian or equalist, but even just the idea of adding on a label to myself, I feel like puts me in a box that I don't want to be in. And so right now I am labelless. Well, definitely, I think the first step to encouraging change in the gender equality discussion is education on the issues. I think that's the very first step, because there is this education gap. What are men's issues? People think men have all the rights, that they're the privileged gender that oppresses the other gender. And that's not the full story, and it's not even half the story. And so I think the first step is education, and this conference, International Conference on Men's Issues in the Gold Coast, is a great first step. And then I think once we educate the public, then men's rights activists can start talking about solutions or what they want to see changed in policy. But I do believe that, you know, all different types of voices and approaches are important. There are a lot of things men's rights activists do that I personally would never do and I don't agree with, like using satire to the point to offend certain groups and be rebel rousers and be provocateurs to get attention. And on one hand, I would never do that. On the other hand, that's what inspired me to make the Red Pill movie, because I was so curious about who is this online men's rights movement. I was offended as a feminist when I was reading their forums, and that's what led me down the rabbit hole. So I see the value in provoking. Well, people should see the Red Pill movie so they can now have an educated opinion about the film. I don't think people should talk about the film without having watched it. And people who are against the film, almost all the time, have not seen the film for themselves. It's not anti-women. It's not even men's rights activist propaganda. It's simply my journey looking at men's issues, and I hope all our viewers take their own journey and begin to question their own beliefs around gender equality.